She's alive! Alive!
Please give a warm welcome to the hosts of
The Bride of
Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. Don't get mad that it has been a month since our last episode about fast zombies. Get glad, or get sad, because we're talking about the sadness today. I am your ghost, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is my co-ghost, Tim Brayton. How are you doing today, Tim?
I am going to murder you. I'm going to take your skull and use it like a wine goblet.
Ooh, okay, you know what? I think Tim has clearly been infected with the Alvin virus, which I think is a very good thing because I think the best thing about you as a podcast host is that you can be very unfiltered. But it's much more fun. It was much more fun for you to be unfiltered when it was Carrie reacting to you because she's so pure and wholesome. And I am a hardened coastal degenerate, so I feel like you try to shock me less.
I that is absolutely the case. I feel this about my own podcasting persona is yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's I don't get a rise out of you, so I don't try to get a rise out of you. And if Carrie was my opposite on this episode, which would not have happened because she would not have made it through this movie.
No.
Would have just had probably a 12-minute discussion of the physics of skull fucking, but
Which
we aren't going to do that today.
This is an educational podcast. But yes, this is the horror sideshow of Alternate Ending. This is our final episode of our Fast Zombies. I guess Q2 is, we were talking about Fast Zombies. We started with Cooties, which was not great. We went to Germany to watch Rambach, Berlin Undead, which I loved, and Tim liked quite a bit, if I recall correctly. And now we're hopping on over to Taiwan for the movie The Sadness. It was directed by Rob Jabaz or Jabaz. I don't know.
In my head, it was Jabaz, but I don't actually know that.
Yeah, Jabaz feels more like what a name might sound like.
Rob Jabaz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel a little less culturally insensitive for not knowing because he is Canadian. Even though this movie is Taiwanese. I don't know exactly how all of this came to be, but it is my understanding that he was living in Taiwan filming a documentary or something when he kind of was developing this movie. But anyway, The Sadness, it does take place in Taiwan. There is a virus called the Alvin virus that is affecting people in the community. It is very obviously, certainly in the first act, it is very obviously a kind of COVID panic metaphor situation. You know, people aren't necessarily trusting the doctors. They're like, I heard it's just the flu. You know, it's not a big deal. People are being conspiracy theory and blah, blah, blah. And like, the things that Ari Aster's Eddington is promising to do in a worse, more annoying way. I'm saying his feels annoying to me already.
It feels extraordinary. I mean, it felt annoying to me when all I knew was that it was a new film by Ari Aster. So
fair enough. But yes, the thing that the Alvin virus does, or at least this new mutant strain of it does, is it basically turns off someone's empathy. Like, so this is most rage viruses that we see, like from 28 Days Later on, like basically turn off all of your upper brain function and just leave you as like pure rage, essentially. But what this one does is it gives people all of their faculties. They're still intelligent. They still know how to speak. They still have their kind of memories and understanding of the world, but they are just now evil, essentially, and want to pursue the most violent, both in terms of bodily harm and in sexual violence, outcomes it's
social media. The Alvin virus is social media.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, it essentially shuts down their empathy rather than anything else, and it's just like, well, what happens if everyone is just out for themselves and
late in the film? Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, late in the film, a doctor tries to explain it as what it does is it severs the relationship between the sex drive and something else, but I don't remember what the something else is. But basically, the impression I get is all of the things that cause us to understand don't be violent get turned off.
Yeah. And the thing that's perhaps most upsetting about the movie is where the title The Sadness comes from, which is the fact that a lot of the zombies, in addition to having these like gross, their eyes are like reddish, and just being like, scary, vaguely zombie-esque. They look a little extra bloody. They have these creepier smiles, but they still mostly look like people. But they also are marked by the fact that they tend to have like a single tear tracking down their face, which the doctor suggests may be the case because somewhere deep inside, some part of them is aware that what they are doing is heinous, but they cannot control themselves.
Yes.
And I'm like, ooh, that is a grim perspective on what this type of thing
that is a
can be.
good bit for the film to announce, and I wish it had been done more. I wish that had been read into the record earlier and more aggressively, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think you're right with that. I think it's more of a grace note than an actual thing that the movie is playing with in a real way.
Because it's potent, but I kind of kept reading it as sweat. Is the problem.
Okay.
So that's a me issue, but I wasn't getting the emotional ugliness that I think very successfully evokes for me. Yeah.
No, it is there's a lot going on there. And we'll talk about that in more depth. But basically, it's a reasonably pared down story, even though it does get expansive in terms of what parts of the city it explores.
Yeah,
do you have something?
Like around the 1 hour mark, I literally found myself having the thought, are we even going to do a plot synopsis on this one? Because I'm not sure that there's been one.
It's pretty easy.
It has character names. We should make sure the character names have been read into the record, I guess.
Yes, and the character names, I'm going to be using the names from the subtitles, which are anglicized in a way that I do not believe is the case in the original. I just don't think.
Are you saying the main character is not named Jim?
I do not believe so. I do not know enough about the two languages in which this movie is delivered, one of which is Mandarin, to really be able to parse what their names might be.
I mean, I can certainly tell you that I never heard anyone say Jim out loud in the film.
Yeah, no, certainly not. And I think so. And then there's Jim, and he's a handsome young swain who's a little bit directionless, and he has a girlfriend named Kat, and I believe that syllable is part of her name. But yeah, they're definitely dumbed down names for us ugly Americans, but I do not know what their names are supposed to be. But anyway, so Jim and Kat are in a relationship. Jim, he's just kind of a little bit aimless, I guess, and she actually has a career and actually has motivations and things that she's trying to do. I believe he's a photographer. We get at least a short reference to him maybe doing a gig next weekend instead of going on a trip.
Yeah, like there's the sort of the closest this movie has to a giving the characters personality and stakes, such that when the plague sweeps in, we'll feel for them, is that they've planned a vacation, and it took Kat an enormous amount of effort to get these vacation days. And now Jim is saying, but I can't go on that vacation because I need to be free all 5 of those days, because one of them I have to work, but I don't know which one it is yet.
Yeah, which I honestly, that is grounds for divorce. They're not even married, but they should get married so she can divorce him.
My response in that scene was not to feel sorry for Jim.
No.
At all.
Nor do I really think you're supposed to.
No,
I think,
no.
Yeah, this is very much, he's not a great boyfriend, and the movie is him suddenly trying to be when they are both imperiled. But yeah, he has taken her to work, but when he gets back to their apartment, there's like a diner situation and his apartment, but we're starting to see the Alvin virus taking hold and people becoming increasingly violent. And he realizes that there is a huge problem and that it is spreading everywhere, and he wants to go collect her and rescue her. So we kind of have a split story of him traveling across town and trying to make his way back into the heart of the city, and her, like, I guess on her lunch break, having escaped chaos in a train, and holing up at this hospital and trying to just survive until he can get to her. And that's basically what the plot is.
Yeah, that is the story, such as sort of remembers to emerge between lengthy sequences of people being menaced by victims of the Alvin virus, which is clearly where the movie's priorities lie. Because I found that I routinely forgot when Jim was not on screen, and I repeat, I've identified him as the main character. When Jim was not on screen, I routinely forgot that he was a character in the movie.
Okay, yeah, that's maybe not great for the story structure. No, it is a Fantasia on a theme of violence more than it is a incredibly well told story.
Which is, to be clear, the film has not argued that it is telling us a well told story. It does not.
No. It
does not lie to us about its intentions or how it's going to execute them. So I'm not saying these are flaws. I'm just saying, I'm kind of setting up what I'm going to say later, but also, yeah, I found Jim and Kat to be pretexts, perhaps more so than characters I was rooting for.
Yeah, well, let's start digging in. So I've seen this movie before. I saw it, I think I saw it like late in the year that it came out in the US, which would have been 2022 or 2020, maybe. God,
I think it came out in the States in 22. It premiered in Taiwan early in 21.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that has like 18 million release dates, and I saw it at some point, but a couple years ago. But this is your first time, right?
This is my first time, yeah. And it's one of those things where I feel like I knew nothing about it before we started the Fast Zombies theme. I had not heard of it.
Okay.
Didn't really start digging into it until about, maybe 3 weeks ago, at which point I discovered, mostly via Letterboxd, that the consensus of opinion is that this is a real hardcore experience that you have to just have absolute nerves of steel to even contemplate getting through this movie. It's just panoply of ultra violence. So then when I actually sit down to watch the film, I found it to be less of that than I was expecting. And we'll probably get into that as well. But I think it is an extremely well-made film that has lots and lots of scenes of violence, but I also feel like maybe I was being sold a more punishing and nihilistic experience than I got.
I absolutely think you're right. And this is something that, watching it again this time, I really was noticing. Because I don't think it's... I think it, like... It gestures towards pushing the envelope in a few scenes, in terms of, like, what it is depicting. I mean, specifically the scene that you referenced earlier, which is, like, there is a skull fucking scene.
That's for sure the most distressing thing that happens in the movie.
Yeah. So there are things that's like, you're not getting this in a lot of movies, and they are a bit outrageous. And it is an incredibly violent movie, and the violence is very well crafted in terms of the effects. I think it is a movie that has this propulsive energy, that makes it perhaps even feel more violent than what you are getting on screen, which I think is an effect of many great horror movies.
Yeah, it's definitely a fast-paced movie, and it's definitely a film that I think uses fast pace in a very cunning way. And I don't want to start just immediately laying all my cards on the table. I think what I liked about it is that it gives you just enough time to recuperate from each big set piece that the next set piece hits hard, but not that it, like... So it's this really fine balance between, it doesn't just constantly press on the gas pedal, so you're not just having stuff flung at you and eventually you get bored of it, but it's still going fast enough that there's a ton of stuff being thrown at you, and it's really, really hard to I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, so maybe I'll put a pin in that and we can come back to it. But yes, no, it's a movie that I think uses momentum in a very, very good way.
Yeah, and also I think that is effective in its depiction of violence, because I was really clocking this time. It's very careful about what it does and what it doesn't show on screen. There is quite a bit of sexual violence. A lot of it is in dialogue, and a lot of it is implied. You're not like seeing penetration really, or it's not really interested in pushing the envelope in that way. And I think what it's doing is like it's not relishing in the violence that it is depicting on screen, even in a not necessarily like there is a lot of sexual violence in cinema, and some of it you're meant to be gratified by in the most scuzzy like 70s grindhouse type way, and then some of it you are meant to be shocked by, like in a Last House on the Left kind of way. But I think even like really edgelordy violence, rape, sex stuff can become fetishistic. And I think this movie exactly avoids doing that at any point with either the violence or the sex, and that makes it feel more potent and alarming. And it's not really enjoyable, but in a good way. Like I think it does feel consistently shocking and it does feel consistently just like it makes it feel intense and not like a fun roller coaster, if that makes sense.
I fully agree, and I think the movie is certainly doing that as a strategy, because one of the things that occurred to me while I was watching it and reoccurred to me while you were saying that, the very first death in the movie, I think, is probably the closest it comes to one that feels like it's just there to be like, look at our cool agora effect. Great. Look at our cool gore effect. And it's like getting that kind of like, ooh, gross, he response from the audience. Great scene. It's in that diner you mentioned, and a weird-ish looking older woman grabs a pot of frying oil and flings it onto somebody's face, and then rips the skin off of his face as it's kind of like cooking on his skin. And we see this in a fairly close up. And that scene feels to me like a sort of very American style gorehound grindhousey. Look at our awesome effect. Isn't this cool? Aren't we so good at this? And it's conspicuously the only sequence in the film that I had that response to. So I think it is deliberately setting up, we could make that movie. Right? We could make that movie that fetishizes violence. That's all about just like the cool response. But we are not. Because every subsequent violent scene, the gore is, I think, shot differently. Like it's not getting these kind of like product shot type lighting and product shot type framing. And as you say, a lot of it is, one doesn't want to say left to the imagination, because I think you don't really have very much to imagine, but we don't necessarily. It does show a lot. It shows a lot, but it doesn't always like show it in detailed close up. And that's true of the violence as well as the more sexualized violence. And so I think the movie knows this, and I think the movie's doing this, and I do think the movie is kind of setting us up to realize that it's made that pivot as well.
Yeah, and there's something very elegant about the way that it does that. And in general, I think it is crafted very well. There's only one element of the aesthetic that I'm like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they fuck with the shutter speed occasionally in a way that just, it's a little pat.
That is my complaint as well. I do not feel like the camera they used, I think, is really what's at play here. I don't know what camera they used. I feel like it might not have been quite the state of the art at the time they were filming it, and it does overall feel a little hot to me. And I think you're right about the shutter speed. They're playing with it without really having a grasp on what it got them.
Yeah, but beyond that, I think it is a very well-crafted movie. I think it looks quite good in terms of, where the camera is placed, how it's moving, what it's doing. It tends to be very satisfying to look at.
Yeah, just a very, very smart film in terms of where the frame has been set. both in terms of what we don't see versus what we do see, but then even what we do see, how we are seeing it. And I don't want to just hopscotch around the movie, but there's a sequence fairly late in the film that I really just was kind of taken aback almost by how impressed the camera angle was to me.
Okay.
And maybe we'll get there. I don't want to spoil everything right at the start.
I mean, I think we can lift the spoiler veil. It's just like this movie, like we've talked about, the story doesn't really have a lot of forward thrust, so it's not like skipping around feels like the way to go with it.
Then I will say the scene where we see the hallucination of a mannequin head, and what we see is so we see kind of two shots. We see a quote unquote objective shot of the mannequin torso, or maybe it's just the head, floating in like a pool of water, and I believe a sewer, or maybe it's an abandoned subway. I don't even remember. Some sort of tunnel.
It's outdoors.
Is it outdoors?
Yeah, it's outdoors.
Okay. It seemed very dark for outdoors, but okay. So we see a mannequin floating in water is the main point, and so we get these shots of it from just a kind of generic medium wide shot, clearly flagged as like objective, clearly telling us this is what you're seeing. But then we get POV shots, but they're not from the POV we've established that the character is sitting in. Mm-hmm. And those POV shots are like a close-up on the mannequin's mouth with a black tongue like flopping out of it and waggling in this really hideous way. And like stringy hair in the foreground out of focus over it, so it looks like the black tongue is like lapping up these weird fuzzy strings of hair, and I found that to be maybe the single most upsetting image in the film.
Yeah, it is. It is genuinely upsetting, and it also just because it does come out of nowhere, but it's just doing this very unusual thing that the movie has not established it's ever going to do.
Right. Like it's the only time we get that kind of POV hallucination, but even just like, again, the fact that the POV is flagged as a POV, but it's not from anywhere, just really unsettled me. And the image itself, I mean, black tongue is one of those things that I just get like immediately have a visceral gag reaction to. But really like that shot a lot. So again, just great manipulation of camera, great manipulation of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I do think that's the strength, because I think that scene particularly speaks to another also weakness of the story, which is that, we're going full spoilers, but by the time that Jim reaches Kat at the hospital, he has become infected with the Alvin virus. And that is kind of the first indication that you get that things are not right in his head. And he's starting to like become a little lightheaded and slip a little bit. But they're really not. They're trying to play with, like, is he infected? Is he not? But they're not doing a good job of that. Specifically, the part where he gets to the hospital and you only see his feet. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's obviously infected. It just doesn't play very well.
No, I did find that to be one of the weakest parts of the film, and maybe even a counter argument to my, well, he really knows where to put the camera, because that's such a trite move. And like, well,
yeah,
we've seen horror movies, we know what that means. Like, if you're showing us a part of the body that is nowhere near the face, you're doing it for one reason only, and that is fine. It's not deficient filmmaking, but it's very unimaginative filmmaking, and I feel like imaginative filmmaking is really the card this movie's trying to play the hardest, so it's more disappointing when it has an infelicity like that.
Yeah, but they're very infrequent is the thing.
That's very true.
But I am curious, because I have seen your Letterboxd review, and you did give this a full star less than me. I like this movie quite a bit. I gave it 4 stars. But what's the gulf there, do you think?
You know, it's definitely one of those. It's not a 3 stars because it's bad. I mean, it's 3 stars because, to a certain extent, I think I've been hinting at this with talking about the characters and such. I didn't care because I had no investment in whether people lived or died, which is not necessarily a requirement. What I actually found myself mentally clocking it against was the Terrifier films.
I think that's fair.
And particularly Terrifier 1, which is a really impeccably mounted demo reel for an effects artist to show us how realistic he can make these things look. But I had very much the same response to the first Terrifier, where like, well, cool, those are good effects. I'm very sold, and if I were in the market to hire an effects artist, you'd be real near the top of my list. But I don't really have an emotional way in to feeling anything about this. And then sort of the contrast then, and I don't know why I've decided to take this all the way to its extent, Terrifiers 2 and 3 found their way into a protagonist who gives me that way in. Mm-hmm. And the Sadness doesn't have that. I think it intended for Kat to be that. I surely can't imagine that it intended for Jim to be that. Jim is just not present enough in the film.
Yeah. Jim is kind of now I'm gonna make my unexpected comparison. He's kind of like Victoria in the movie Cats. He's kind of there to be led by the hand and shown terrible things.
That's good. I like that.
Thank you. But yeah, so no, I totally get that. For me, I think the thing that makes me not have that issue is like, well, I'm always compelled by the beginning of a zombie movie, or at least the the part of a zombie apocalypse story where society is kind of still half propped up, but it is crumbling because of the sheer weight of the horror that is happening. So I'm compelled by it in terms of a kind of almost an Eisensteinian collective cinema idea of watching the society around them crumble more than how they react to it. I think that one of the best scenes, I mean, this is a lateral move in terms of my ideas. This maybe doesn't necessarily flow directly, but I think one of the best scenes is the creepy old businessman who becomes one of the major zombie antagonists. He's originally just like trying to chat up Kat on the train, and it's a situation that many a person traveling alone on a train has had to deal with. And then it becomes increasingly exaggerated and more terrifying as it turns into this hyperbolic, hyper-violent, he is targeting her beyond just the normal kind of like evilness of the patriarchy, you know, just into this incredibly operatic, violent world that they have been thrust into over the course of this train ride. And I think things like that, of just watching how society functions before and after the Alvin virus gets to it, that's something that is interesting to me, and that fair. I can continuously be compelled by, even if the characters are a little bit flat.
No, that's fair. And I mean, it's not just that the characters are flat. It's more that I never quite. So I think there's a couple things at play. I never quite got my way into the film as an actual study of society, though I'm certainly glad you did. The businessman is actually, I think, an interesting, for me, example of how the story, such as there is a story, is just kind of there, because he is presented as this kind of recurring figure, right? Like he as you say, we meet him being the worst version of himself before getting infected, and then we see how the virus makes that even worse and even more horrifying. And he is removed from the film. Great scene. Again, terrific. Whoever on this film's crew was responsible for exploding and or smashing skulls just deserves the biggest bonus, because there is a grenade scene in this movie that is top 5 exploding heads in cinema. I found that scene impeccable. Not the scene, but the effect was impeccable. Although the scene was pretty good. It was actually one of the places, I don't want to get ahead, I'll get back to that scene. But when the businessman is dealt with by having his head caved in by a fire extinguisher, it felt to me like a climactic moment, but there's 25 minutes of film left, including a whole new villain arc. And
yeah.
And that to me is just kind of like, again, the story's not here, and I'm not like a story Nazi by any stretch of the imagination, but I did feel like it did not help with the feeling I had throughout the movie that it was really just a particularly well executed demo reel.
Yeah, and I don't think that you're wrong. And I'm also not saying it's like some sort of genius study of society, but that's just something that I can dig into and enjoy as part of these genre films.
That's legit. And the other thing I do want to say, and I think this might be the other maybe part of the reason why you're at 4 and I'm at 3. What I have learned, maybe relearned, but certainly come into direct contact with as we've gone through this theme of ours, I think I just don't have a ton of, I don't want to say patience for. Fast zombies aren't my jam. I'd say it's maybe where I'm at. Because I very much, in that first act, my response was very much, oh, I've seen this routine before, and like, the movie didn't have me before everything started going to hell. So I think that would be a big difference between you and I. Because to me, it's like every movie about a strange new virus, and it kind of creeps its way into society around the edges the same way, they all kind of start to feel the same to me.
Yeah, no, I
guess not
I
fast
do get
zombies,
that.
rage virus movies, I guess, which fast zombie movies, as we've learned, I think tend to be rage virus movies.
Almost always. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's just a matter of taste.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's something very compelling about formula when you love it. There's a reason.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. This is something I think about all the time with the slasher movies that I watch. It's like, why have I seen 400 slasher movies when they tend to have the same formula? And I think there's something very fun about knowing the ins and outs of a formula and watching the tiny little details around the edge that make it different. And that's why, Agatha Christie novels are popular. Mm-hmm. And that's why, when it's a formula, you have to be like fully in it and fully invested, and if it's not quite to your taste, it's just not going to hit. You're going to be incredibly bored. Same with rom-coms are the same way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that is absolutely, it really does come down to taste, because I'm there with slasher movies. I mean, I think that in general you give slasher movies more star ratings than I do, but that's not because I don't love them. It's because I feel like at a certain point they're just not 4-star movies, but I still like engaging with them. I like sort of living in that space. I like seeing how those pieces are broken apart and reconstituted. And to go in a fully different direction, that's how I engage with the cinema of Yasujiro Ozu. Is like seeing the incredibly fine distinctions in how this particular retiree father and this particular adult daughter who's never been on a date are going to resolve their almost indistinguishable differences. And again, it is very much, if you're into that, it's high art, and if you're not into that, it's boring stories of the same Japanese guy and his same Japanese daughter over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
And I would never tell someone that was an illegitimate response to Ozu.
Yeah, exactly. It just, it has to be something that's been mapped onto your DNA by really loving quite a few movies. Yeah. And the thing is, speaking about Letterboxd scores for things, I have fully embraced the idea that there's no such thing as objectivity in reviewing cinema. So I just fully go with vibes as far as what my score is.
That's real. I think for me, it's that I do still have a Rotten Tomatoes presence, and I don't want to be like, I want to take that at least vaguely seriously.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. This is not the format in which we should be talking about this. Anyway, moving on. What else is there? Let's see. Sorry, I'm checking through my notes really quick. I do enjoy that the head exploding scene, which is the press conference going terribly wrong.
I will say about that scene, it's one of the times when the cinematography really leapt out at me as being great, because the person who gets blown up is on television giving a national address, and the way he's shot, like with his hand kind of out towards the camera in this, I think, very, very wide angle lens, making his hand just kind of loom up. It's just really cool and threatening and weird and uncanny. And it just creates this mood of like something horrible is about to happen, and then it does. And then his head blows up, and again, perfect head explosion.
And this movie has a very good sense for that exact feeling. Because right before the first death, and I think we've been calling it a diner, and that's my fault because that's the first thing that I said, but it's kind of like just a walk-in restaurant, almost like a bodega kind of grill kind of place. But before that first death happens, It just keeps cutting back to shots of the guy grilling things on the grill, like he's making tofu. And there's something very sinister and ominous about that I don't even understand exactly why, other than I know I'm watching a horror movie. But I found it to be really effective.
I did too. I think this movie in general does a very good job of using cutaway shots to feel ominous. I credit, I guess, the color grading. I think this movie feels ill.
Yeah, definitely.
Like it is true both in, I don't think it's color grading, I think it's makeup, but the infected people are all very clammy looking.
Yeah.
Like they don't have like a Dawn of the Dead style. They're blue now, but they all look kind of chalky.
Yeah, there's clearly something off about them, and the fact that it's hard to really exactly put your finger on it.
Right. And like their eyes seem to be kind of murkier and darker, and that plus their skin plus the lighting plus the sweatiness, which, as you say, is meant to be tears. I just kind of didn't read it that way.
Well, I mean, they're also sweaty, but some of them do have like a perfect single tear like that tracks down their cheek.
Sure. Which again, I that is very true, and that was a misstep on my reading of the film. But to me, that's why I called it sweat, because I read it sweat. But like, so we have these like people just look unwell, and I mean that's kind of the requirement of the genre in a way. So it's not necessarily an achievement that they've done that, but I think they've done it extremely well. And so the whole movie just has this pallor, and I like that about it.
Yeah, no, it is excellent. And also, and just while we're on the subject of the impending doom, after the businessman has been infected, there is a very good shot of a cat and a girl that she has rescued from the train in the kind of subway tunnels trying to leave the station, and he's standing at the end of the hallway, like perfectly symmetrical and like with the fluorescent lights above him, and it's just very ominous. It's very creepy. There are moments that do feel like, oh, this is a horror movie and not just a gore movie, because those are two different things.
Absolutely. No, I think that is one of the things that's very successful at, and going back to what you said earlier, that Jabaz, or however we're pronouncing his name, is very good at making us do just enough of the work in terms of what we didn't see, that it becomes, I think, more horrifying that way, because in a sense the movie is activating the part of your own brain that is capable of visualizing these things. So it's nice because the movie's kind of playing around with that idea of like, well, it's in all of us, right? The ability to visualize these disgusting things, and so it's kind of forcing you into that. But I think also just by not showing it, it's not giving us that cathartic release.
Ooh.
Right? So and this is something I've long felt about gore effects. Gore effects aren't scary; they're gross, they're funny, they're whatever they are, depending on who you are as a viewer. But they aren't really scary because they are the release. Right, it's the same way that when you laugh, you're releasing whatever tension the comedian was building up in you, and so I think by relatively, I mean, again, this is, I think, as you said on your Letterboxd, you wouldn't show this film to your grandma.
No, but it does feel like you could show it to someone and still feels relatively safe.
To compare it to a Terrifier, which just really lives in, here's what happens if you try to carve a body with a chainsaw from the testicles up. Like, that is not something that's being activated by this movie. It's not just kind of lovingly embracing the gore effects with its eyes, so we don't get those releases. We don't get those moments of like, ew, gross, ha ha ha, or ew, gross, I need to walk away, or whatever. And I think that's what makes it feel more horrifying, to me at least, is that it's just a constant pressure valve, and he's never unwinding the pressure valve. Sometimes he's not winding it forward, and those are those moments where the plot kind of kicks in and we get to recuperate, but he never releases the pressure.
That's a really good point. And that, and that's why it does feel potent. It does feel a lot, and it does make sense why people might think this was such a violent gauntlet. But also, I think most people kind of maybe would come out of it feeling proud of like, I did it, I made it through. But it's not as, I don't know, it's not as challenging in the sense of the way it has been presented. I think it's challenging in a different way that people maybe aren't
because it's
receiving.
It's very much presented as a like in the if you loved a Serbian film sort of thing, right? Like
Yeah, which no.
which I still haven't seen. So
I haven't either, but I have no interest. I don't intend to.
fair enough. I doubt I will make it to my grave without having seen a Serbian film, to be honest.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But anyway,
I should take that.
What?
I don't know how I should take that.
You should take it as a fact because you said it and I agree. You are a cineast to your bones and you need to have seen things.
Yes, that is very true.
You've seen all of the I forget what are they called witchcraft? Is that what it is?
They're called witchcraft. I've seen every witchcraft.
Exactly. Like that is a more challenging thing than watching a Serbian film once.
It's certainly more challenging than watching The Sadness.
Oh, absolutely. But yes, while we are kind of getting to the end of our discussion about The Sadness, I wanted to bring up the acting. I think most of the actors are pretty good.
Yeah.
Although the secondary antagonist, who is the doctor that Kat does meet hold up in the maternity ward, he delivers this monologue that is completely over the top and does not work for me. It's a little too much, and that undermines him as a suitable replacement for the businessman.
Yeah, no, I think that the movie still has some good moves once it hits the doctor arc.
Yes.
Like I guess it's probably the last act of a 3 or 4 act structure, but like I think it still has moves. I don't think the movie just collapses at that point. Incredible shot, and I will avoid going into real detail because I think it's a great moment to experience. Incredible shot of a baby in a garbage can.
Oh my god!
Really, just right up there with the mannequin tongue. As I wasn't ready for that when the movie gave it to me. So I don't want to say the movie collapses.
Because it is so delicate about when it does those more shocking things, it balances them really well. But yeah, no, it doesn't collapse. I think the very last moment is a fun grace note. It is literally one we've seen before, but it's the ending that this movie had to have, and it does, and it feels right.
No, it does. But no, what I was going to say, even though I don't think it collapses, I do think that bringing in the doctor character is a stumble that the movie struggles with a lot. Because I don't think it needs exposition at that point. Like, if it was going to have the exposition, it really should have had it earlier. And I also just don't think that character is very good.
No, he's not that interesting.
And the other asterisk I would put on the acting is a relatively small one, which is to say that the actress playing Molly.
That's the friend from the train.
The friend from the train. It's partially the silly conception of what the movie wants, which is that she has her eye stabbed out with an umbrella and then keeps going for a while after that happens, which I question. But other like the moment where she gets the umbrella in her eyeball, which is I think one of the few moments that I clocked as definitely CGI.
Okay.
Mostly this movie uses practical effects. I think the blood spurt coming out of her eye was CGI. But that scene's played really well. After that, she mostly does not act like someone who has just had an eye poked out of her socket and is maybe physically anything from that, which is a weird specific bugaboo of mine. Like I get a little annoyed when actors don't seem to have incorporated whatever physical damage their character has experienced into their performance. It's the same reason why that dreadful cancer movie with what was it? The Fault in Our Stars. I just get so mad by how not exhausted from chemo they are. Very different register, very different movie. But I felt a little bit like her performance was not taking into account the extreme physical trauma that her character had undergone.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our things about that, but yeah, no, that's totally valid. But I mean, I last night, my boyfriend Ben and we watched Challengers for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And it was I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was quite fun. It whatever. Read my Letterboxd review. But the bit which everybody knows, it's in the trailer where Zendaya is kind of having the two boys kiss her, and it's kind of like a 3-way kiss situation. I'm like, these characters are supposed to be 18. There's no way that 18-year-olds would navigate this situation in this way. They're way too smooth at making this happen. But anyway, so that we all have our things.
Yeah, no, I certainly have thoughts about challengers, but this isn't the place for that discussion.
No, it's not, and I'm sorry for bringing it up. Anything else about the sadness before we kind of close the book on this one?
I sure do. I mean, I'm more curious for your thoughts than wanting to express my own. I read the logline and I saw the release date, and I don't actually know for sure when it was shot, but it feels pretty clear it was shot in the first half of 2020, just based on what happened. This is a movie about a pandemic that causes the people around you to become giant assholes. And you don't need a doctorate in decoding narrative symbolism to think that there might be something going on there. And I don't want to say I wanted the movie to be a referendum on the COVID pandemic, because I would have found that very tiresome. Again, I am not looking forward to Eddington. I am going to watch
it looks
that film
like garbage.
only when I absolutely must, because I don't really want to hear Ari Aster's thoughts.
No, yeah. If we have to hear someone's thoughts, it is not his.
I don't even know that I want to hear anyone's thoughts, but certainly not his. He's towards the bottom of that list. So I'm not like saying, why wasn't this movie more avowedly about COVID? I was very surprised by what felt to me the degree to which it wasn't even glancingly about that. Like, I brought it in because I was alive in 2020. I know what the context they were making it in, but it felt to me like that was more... The movie was like, great, there's a pandemic going on. I've got a pandemic-themed horror script. I can sell it. Rather than actually trying to make any sort of commentary on that, which surprised me.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like all of the dialogue in Act 1 is COVID satire, essentially. I don't know that it... Like, once it picks up, it doesn't feel very direct in what it's covering, and I do feel like you're right about that. I think the overall metaphor, like the idea that a pandemic is affecting people in a way that spreads panic, that spreads individualism, that turns, like, fucks with people's heads and makes them pursue their own means and their own ids because they feel like everything is over, like, does feel like an experience that we had, or at least thought we were going to have during the quarantine period. But yeah, I feel like, I don't feel like it's a superficial connection to the COVID pandemic, but I don't feel like it fully explores that, like, draws out that theme.
And, you know, even having laid out the calendar I did, I wonder if it is literally the difference between this film was probably scripted, like this, they had a final shooting script probably by like the end of April. Is this a movie that feels different if it's a year later? And maybe that's what I'm getting at, because, like, it's easy to forget how much the first half of 2020 did not feel like the second half of 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and the things you are pointing to at that point would feel very different. Like, the way that society changed so much, like,
yeah,
or that the way we approached it changed.
Right. So maybe, and I'm not complaining. Like, the last thing I want is a harangue about how people be during COVID. But I guess I was just expecting more of it. And to me, it felt, after the opening 10 minutes, this movie could have come out in 1996 without any changes beyond those, like, opening 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. But, and also, like, as you said, like, this came out in January 2021. Like, they clearly had the idea
and like
the germ of it first.
I know
so
it was greenlit, I know, as a response to the early stages of the pandemic. So it is a pandemic film. It's not like they had this film ready to go in like December 2019. So it's a response to the pandemic, but it's a response to the really, really early part of the pandemic. So it's, who can say?
And so there's less nuance to what you can say too.
That's
so that makes sense. That's also very true. And yeah, same thing. I don't really want to be thinking about it. Like, the opening credits have like a kind of CGI. It is the coronavirus. It has the thorny and there's just like a CGI kind of virus attacking blood cells and stuff, and it's just like, I don't need that. I don't want to think about it. Like, I've been here. We've done this. life is horror enough. I like it when I really like when a movie has something to say and it is hidden behind a veil of allegory, but when it is like a one-to-one, I get really sick of it.
No, I mean, I have a really, really low threshold for tolerating allegory. So, like, I'm not saying this movie needed to be more allegorical. I just, I was a little thrown by it because I was expecting it to be much more vocal about that. So it's not a complaint. It's more just I kind of wanted to get your sense on, I did so thank you.
That makes sense. You are welcome. That's where I am on that. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's a very well-made film. I think it's making a lot of great choices. Again, mechanically, Jabaz knows how to stage a film, and I think it's weird that this does not seem to translate into a career for him. Great gore effects. I feel like, to me, it was a pretty straightforward experience.
Yeah, and I like that. It feels very just like, it's kind of a basic kind of adrenaline kind of movie. It's very go, very very bloody, very intense, and I reacted to that quite well.
Yeah, it makes you want to feel bad, and it does, and I think that's it achieves the goal it set. So cannot call it a failure.
Yeah, it certainly does. I don't know in what I said. I feel like I could recommend it to more people. Like, I feel like I could recommend it to quite a few people without feeling like if they watched it and didn't like it, that they would think I was a bad person.
Agreed. To compare it to the Terrifiers, I would say that I would recommend this to more people than I would recommend Terrifier, but the people I recommended Terrifier to, I would do so with greater, you gotta see this.
Yeah.
Because, like, the people who I think want that kind of thing would want it a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so that's the sadness, and that is the end of Q2 of us talking about Fast Zombies. But show ain't over. We got more stuff going on. Next week, you're going to get another alternate ending main feed episode. I believe Tim is leading that one. You're doing the July preview,
we're gonna do
right?
The July movie preview, so you're going to get to hear me express how thrilled I am for Superman.
Oh my goodness. And Smurfs. Smurfs, the number one movie.
Can I try this out on you, Brennan?
Okay.
And you can tell me if I should bring it onto the main episode. More like Pooperman.
Oh, truly lacerating satire.
I've been workshopping that one for 9 months.
Okay. Yeah, oh my God, it looks terrible. Anyway, but yeah, you can find more episodes of this show and others at alternateening.com. More reviews by Tim, including The Summer of Blood is on, y'all.
Ooh.
Summer of Blood has returned. You said, is this the first one since Alternate Ending started? That can't be right.
No, I think I did one
but
in
it's the new
2022.
version.
This is the first one since we've reconstituted ourselves as is the thing we have reconstituted ourselves into being.
Yes, and I'm very, very excited for the return. And
of course, if you haven't been following along with those reviews, it is a Bride of Alternate Ending family affair because I have had a list of slashers curated for me by your very own Brennan Klein.
Yes,
who, as
thank
we said,
you.
has seen 400 slasher movies. So
yeah, it's so many. But I was very honored for Tim to reach out to me to curate this list. It does feel like Michelangelo asking you to look over his notes or his outline for the Sistine Chapel. I was just like, oh, what, me? Okay. But yeah, so I picked all 1980s slasher films that Tim has not seen, and I've grouped them into 5 categories. Right now he's doing actors who either would be huge stars or were huge stars, kind of slumming it during the slasher period in the 80s, which is
late
career
fun. / early career skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for more of those all throughout summer, and I think that's going to do it. So until next time, bye-bye!
She hates me.